Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to this week's episode of the Flower Lounge. This is going to be a little bit different of a format. I'm really excited about this. I want to introduce this week's guest, who is a team member on LOTUSWEI. Her name is Tessa, and if you haven't been to any Flower Lounge events, Tessa is our brilliant photographer, and she's in charge of a lot of projects. One of her latest new ones is taking on this podcast, and she's been collecting all kinds of questions, and we're just going to have a chat, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Thanks for being here.
I'm very, very excited to start doing this.
Yeah, after a long trip across Europe.
Yeah, it's a nice little project to come back to, and I'm really excited to share everybody's questions that they've been sending in.
What's the first one?
So this whole series of questions are going to be kind of like a throwback, in the early days of the business questions, kind of how you started off and everything. The first question is, what did life look like for you at the time when you started LOTUSWEI?
Oh my God. I mean, when I first started working with clients, I was actually not in the United States. I was living in Mexico. I had studied with an expert in flower essences who was from Spain, and I ended up opening a practice in Querétaro, Mexico. That's a city of 1 million people, 3 hours north of Mexico City. And I was doing hands-on healing and Reiki sessions, and then giving people customized blends of flower essences. So what did life look like? I was living in a little apartment in this colonial city with cobblestone streets. And every morning I'd wake up and, go to the market and get a big plastic bag full of juice with a straw for like 30 cents. Yeah, I remember, I think I still have somewhere in a file, the very first brochure I ever made in Spanish. So, I think that's kind of interesting. It's the side of the business people don't often understand that, yeah, our first brochure was in Spanish.
So I've always been so curious about this myself. How did the actual idea, were you in a consultation with a client when it kind of came to you? Was it slow progressing? Were you walking down the street with your bag of juice with a straw?
like in terms of how did I find flower essences in general, or the name of the company?
I would say, oh God, I did it. I said I've been trying to really be on top of it.
Right.
Don't say or not.
Tessa's been doing editing, so she's got to edit herself.
I'm very hyper aware of ums and likes. I can't believe I just did it. I would say when you first got the idea to branch out on your own outside of consultations, more so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. It was basically, I did consultations for quite a long time, for 10 years. I really took to heart that, you have to put in 10,000 hours of something to just even begin to start to master it. So really, really put in my time. What led me to create a company and teach myself how to be an entrepreneur was the fact that the clients I was seeing such crazy, freaking phenomenal transformations in people. I just couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. People would come into my office, in some cases just be a total mess, and then come back 3 weeks later and be fine, on top of the world, great, empowered. And that was just, the short-term benefits, watching people evolve and transform over the long term and gain insights and rich wisdom and really feel like they were beginning to know themselves on a deeper level and understand their lives and feel so much more fulfilled. It was that kind of thing that it started to make me crazy, because I would go to these networking meetings and it was so embarrassing. I would start talking about flower essences, and in those days, nobody wanted to hear about flower essences. Meditation was not cool. And right, we were living in a very different world at that time. And it was so frustrating to me because I felt like it needed to be a reality TV show. I felt like if the rest of the world could see what I was seeing, every person on the planet should get that opportunity. And I wasn't going to reach every person on the planet by doing consultations.
So how did you know where to start? Once the idea was created, you're like, okay, this is what I want to do. How did you even know where to start? And,
No clue. You never know where to start. You just have to figure it all out as you go. That's if anybody asks me, what's your number one top tip for business? It's always you just figure every single thing out. And that's constantly what you do over the life of business is keep figuring out new things. Yeah, so I had no clue. I knew that in the United States, people bought flower essences in health food stores. So I thought, well, there's a good chance, right? That's where people are looking for them. So I spent thousands of dollars along with Lisa at We Have Chocolate to buy this enormous booth at the Natural Products Expo, which is like absolutely freaking insane, right? Like we were clueless. We had no idea what we were doing. We were not business people. We bought this extremely expensive trade show booth. We put together this amazing booth with Jimmy and Frank with PVC pipe and like, velvet red curtains that we got from the fabric store. It was like, it was really funny. We like drove in a minivan with 6 or 7 of us to California, and we're loading stuff in the hallway, in this enormous expo space. And I see this guy and I'm like, hey, so how do these shows go for you? Do you like do really well in sales? I was so naive. And he was like, oh, what are you talking about? I never make any money at these shows. This is just a promotion. I was like, oh my God, sinking feeling. So I think I collected, just for myself alone, not including chocolate, for the flower essences portion of it, I collected over 300 business cards of interested people. And then after that, I hired an assistant and we emailed and called every single one. I think we got 2 or 3 orders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was total.
Did you feel defeated or inspired?
I felt like, what the hell? Like, if this is the only place in the United States where these are made available and they don't want me, what does that mean? Like, what do I do now?
Yeah. So I think what you're getting at is it's safe to say you didn't have any like prior experience or background schooling in business.
Hell no.
Yeah, in the structure of business and no degree, nothing like that.
Oh God, no. I would not recommend it, actually. I would recommend against getting a business degree. I would just, like, seriously, I would save your money and put that money into growing your own business. It's the fastest way to learn. You could come out with an MBA and still be clueless about business, like really how to do it.
So when was the first time that you heard of flower essences?
Yeah, this is a good story. I included this in the book. So the reason I was in Mexico was I graduated from college, and then I had already lived in Europe for several years at that point. And I saw all my friends getting cell phones and car payments and mortgage payments and getting stuck in these jobs they didn't like. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had a degree in sociology. This is like going back to your age. I was like, what am I going to do? I have no idea. I didn't want to get stuck in something that I didn't totally love. I didn't want to get trapped. So I left the country, and I actually originally went to Mexico to do volunteer work and lived in this 4-story enormous colonial house, helping adolescents who come from communities who don't ever go past 4th grade, come to the city, go through high school and college, and evolve like that. So I was spending my days doing that. And then in all my free time, my little side education was studying as many forms of natural remedies that I could find. It's like a hotbed in Mexico for natural remedies. You can find anything and everything there. But how I found flower essences, it was like a holiday or something. There was nobody on the streets. I don't know why I was on the street. I was walking down the street. There was no one around. And this beautiful little indigenous woman approached me. And, the Otomi people in Querétaro, they have these long braids with ribbons, and the braids are tied together in the back with their beautiful skirts. And she handed me a flyer. And typically, that's like, you see that everywhere in Mexico. People will stand on corners and just hand out flyers like crazy. But I thought it was kind of odd that she chose an odd day to hand out flyers, because there was literally no one on the streets except for me. So I took the flyer and I keep walking, and I like glance down and look at it. And I'm like, flower essences, esencias de flores en la Ciudad de Mexico. Like, what? And I kept reading, and I got really interested, workshop in Mexico City, such and such date. I was like, this sounds really cool. So I turn around, she's gone. I start jogging. I'm like looking down the streets, trying to find her, look down the street, like literally running around the block. and I couldn't find her.
She vanished.
She vanished. So I took it as a sign, and I went to that class in Mexico City, and that's where I met my teacher, Pedro Lopez Clemente, who had come from Madrid to teach.
And side note, for those of you listening, Katie knows how to speak Spanish.
Luckily, because that's the only language he taught in.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of assumed. But that's pretty awesome. So what was the first flower essence that you made?
Okay, so I started my practice, like after that point I started my practice in Mexico. I did that for a while. One January morning I woke up and was like, I am in the wrong freaking place. I need to go back immediately. So like the next day I decided to go back to the United States. It was wintertime. I was not going back to the Midwest. I chose Arizona, had an uncle here. It just worked out. I worked with my teacher's flower essences for 7 years. So I used his set of 100-some essences to customize elixirs for people for 7 years, until actually one of my roommates, bless her heart, she said, why aren't you collecting your own flower essences? And I was like, oh my God, that's such a great idea. Why am I not? So the very, very first flower essence I ever made was apricot flower, and it was outside the office where I was at the farm at South Mountain. That, I don't know, I think I was just sort of practicing to see what it would be like. And then the very first flower essence collection trip I went on was in British Columbia, and it was like a marathon. It was a full moon lunar eclipse day, and a friend and I made 15 flower essences in one day in the alpine village outside of Whistler. It was pretty amazing.
So apricot flower, what does that magnify, dissolve?
Yeah, so apricot's really good for tenderness and softness. It's really similar to it's so interesting in all of the, what do you call those? The fruits with a little pit inside? Stone fruits.
Stone fruits.
Okay, so all the stone fruits have similar qualities, like peach, almond, nectarine. What else is there? Plum. Yeah, they're all sort of like different versions of softness and tenderness. Apricot would be really good for when we are sort of like longing for more attention or affection, and it just helps us feel really full of sweetness of our own.
So do you feel like you were drawn to that flower from, the current state that you were in?
It's very possible. I mean, it sounds like something I would be attracted to. I remember that it had just like, boom, it just bloomed. Those types of fruits bloom for like 2 weeks and then it's over. And I just remember, it was the first time I'd ever seen that tree in bloom, and I was just fascinated by it. So it was one of those things where it was like impermanence. It's going to bloom and it's going to be gone. So it was like, capture it now. Now's the time.
So moving away from essences and into aromatherapy, that's another question that I also have been curious about is, did you have any prior aromatherapy teaching that you had done before? Like, how did you learn how to blend scents together and make them smell as awesome as they do?
Yeah, I think I first started learning about aromatherapy in Mexico. I took some classes there. And then I took additional classes with a woman named Kita Centella in Phoenix. She has a beautiful herb shop. And it wasn't until I really got into it with Jeannie Rose. She's just a brilliant woman. She's like a walking encyclopedia. The woman literally knows everything about gardening, herbalism, essential oils, perfumery, spa products. She's phenomenal. She used to design clothes for Janis Joplin. She's a very cool lady and has an amazing history. Anyway, so I holed up with a handful of other people in her San Francisco apartment, actually in her attic, that her attic is devoted 100% to botanical perfumery. And she has this beautiful array of hundreds of essential oils that are all labeled and numbered. And she's funny. She's a really strict lady. Like, you have to wear white. You have to use number 2 pencils. There are certain things she's really strict about. If you follow the rules, you're good. If you don't, watch out for the wrath.
I bet her attic smells amazing.
Oh, it
I'd want to go
smells
in that attic.
so good. And she's a phenomenal teacher. Not only did she teach us how to recognize all the different notes, how to blend, how to create, bass, middle heart, top note types of formulations, but just really how to think outside the box, how to take any scent of anything, even something totally new to you, and recognize the notes in it and classify it out and see what it would overlap with well in terms of other oils. Literally, we spent 10 days, the entire day of 10 days, 10 full on from morning till night days, smelling. We'd have to go out in her garden and get fresh air, or stick my head out the window so you can keep formulating. She had amazing exercises we did. I just have to tell you about this because it's so cool. So she had collected at one point t-shirts that she gave out to an assortment of people. Some were women, some were men, and of different ages. And then they'd wear the t-shirt for a week straight without bathing. Then put the t-shirt into a Ziploc bag. Amazing, right? So we had to open up each of these Ziploc bags, smell them, and then say whether we thought it was a woman or a man and the age.
Wow.
Fascinating, right?
Yeah. What was your success rate?
It was funny. It's like the women were the stinkiest. We were thinking, the men were going to be like, whoa, but it was like young women too. It's really interesting. And then another thing we did that was really cool is we made an extract or a perfume from the military combat glove that her son had used in the Middle East. She was obviously in love with her son, and she had saved his gloves. And how bizarre is that, right? To make a perfume.
That sounds like something my mom would do.
Except
Except not make a perfume out of it.
Like leather, gunpowder, dust. How is all that gonna smell? And it was amazing. Honestly, the scent of it was pure and sweet. Pure like a 18-year-old boy's essence. So that's where I really learned how to trust my nose rather than just intellectual understanding of oils.
So back to the business, realm as a whole. So when you first started this business, were your friends and family supportive? Did anybody have, any negative feedback about the idea? Or was it all pretty smooth sailing and everybody was with you and it just took off?
Well, it wasn't ever smooth sailing, but there wasn't ever anyone in my life who was discouraging. I was at the time, so when I came back to the United States, I needed to get a couple jobs because I obviously didn't have a clientele built up here. For a year and a half, I worked in a health food store. Then for another year and a half, too, I worked as a crisis counselor. Working as a crisis counselor was really intense, extremely intense. You've heard some of the stories. It just got to a point where I was really tired of fearing for someone coming after me and being violent. I didn't like that state of being in fear all the time. And it was starting to affect my mind stream. And it was actually my teacher who really encouraged me to quit. And I was like, I'm not ready. I don't have enough clients built up. But he was so fearless and encouraged me to be fearless. And he was just like, it's time, quit. And I didn't even give a 2-week notice. I gave a 1-week notice.
Wow.
It had just gotten really extreme and dire, and I was done with the fear part. So yeah, 1-week notice, quit. And everyone was supportive of me, especially my roommates and the people I lived with. It's honestly, I probably couldn't have started the business without them. I live in a house of roommates that's very Asian style, sort of like if 1 out of 5 people isn't able to pay the bills and everybody sort of takes over and helps out. And you may have heard stories of, families that will all support somebody's business until it grows up to a point of stability, and then they all help another person. So it was like that. And in fact, I probably wouldn't have made it had I not been in such a supportive household.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Very lucky.
Yeah, I was putting groceries on credit cards. It was to that level.
Okay, so that was actually a question I was going to ask earlier, is when you started the business, did you feel financially set?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
Absolutely not. I mean, when you're doing consultations, it's money for time. So you're limited in terms of how much you can do. I could probably do max 5 to 6 appointments a day, max, without being too fatigued.
Would you take any flower essences? Were you on any flower essences when you started the business?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, as soon as I found out about them, I've been taking them ever since.
So just to branch off for a second, if somebody were planning on starting a business, somebody were, diving into the field of entrepreneurialism,
Mm-hmm.
is that how you say that?
Mm-hmm.
What combination of flower essences? I'm putting you on the spot here, but if you had to pick about 3 flower essences for somebody, embarking on this adventure, what flower essences would they be? And you can pick blends as well.
Mm-hmm. And the first one that comes to mind is the Night Blooming Cereus. That comes with a story. I don't have to get into it, but that is the story. I mean, that's the flower that changed my life and my business overnight. From doing consultations to having huge clients, like a huge 5-star spa and resort, and making stuff for the President of the United States at that time, and all of that craziness. That came from the Night Blooming Cereus flower, which is also in the full bloom. Full bloom is coming soon. Yeah, so Night Blooming Cereus, that dissolves any sort of fears or ideas of limitation and helps you take a big leap. So instead of taking like baby steps, it helps you take a huge leap toward your full potential. And I would recommend a blend called Inner Peace. There are some flowers in there for helping you feel comfortable being uncomfortable, getting more comfortable being uncomfortable, which is what you want to do in a business, is like constantly throw yourself out there in situations that just feel awkward. And bamboo is for determination. If you ever feel like, oh, I can't do it, it just gives you this like rush of persistence. Yes, I can do it. And determination and the ability to grow quickly. Inspired action, because it gets rid of procrastination, overwhelm, where do I start, and just helps you sort of toss yourself out there.
Those are some heavy hitters.
Yeah.
So since starting LOTUSWEI, what would you say, if you've had any, would be your greatest failures?
Well, I mean, the first one was the flop in terms of identifying where our target market was, in terms of who do we sell to. Going to that Natural Products Expo and getting one order. I mean, you could consider that a failure. I'm actually really grateful that those doors were not open, because we found the spa industry, and that led into a whole other, much more beautiful and fruitful and appropriate place for us to be, where women are running the show, and this is a more holistic, experience-based, sensory experiences, and very high-end and luxurious. But that initial flop was a failure, total failure. Probably every freaking networking meeting I went to in the early 2000s was a total failure and flop. I was so goddamn shy. Like, I was just, painfully shy and tongue-tied. And like the thought of getting in front of 100 people and getting up to the microphone and saying like, hi, my name is Katie Hess and I make flower essences. Ooh, it was just so uncomfortable. And nobody wanted to know about what I did, and they just thought I was some awkward, weird alien. Like, like they were embarrassed for me. I mean, it was just like,
I've had nightmares like that.
Those are real, over and over and over and over again. Yeah, I don't know how many of those ridiculous networking. That would be another piece of advice. Just skip the networking meetings. Don't go to those networking meetings. Network, meet people, make connections, put yourself in uncomfortable positions, talk to people in elevators, all that. Don't go to those networking meetings. Ugh.
Did you have to take any classes on public speaking?
I mean, I think I went to one. Someone was like, "Gee, you should try." What is that one group called, where you go and do speeches? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'm sure some listeners like shouting out the name right now, where they like count your ums and force you to be a really good public speaker.
It's gonna come to me right after we.
Exactly. So I went to one of those just to sort of put my little toe in and see what it was like, and I never went back after that. No, I didn't take any classes. I just, did it a lot for 15, 18 years and got comfortable.
Was there ever a time when you thought, oh crap, this is the end of LOTUSWEI? I've messed up really bad. Or you've just hit a rut and you lost some of your drive?
Nope.
Awesome. I guess that's what happens when you embark on a, passion-based business.
Well, I mean, I think there are two things going on. One is I laugh with one of my roommates, Lisa, who runs Way of Chocolate, because we honestly, like locally here, when we look at businesses that were around when we first started, and so many of the businesses are no longer in business, and we kind of look at each other and laugh like, what the heck, why are we still in business? Why are all these other amazing, talented people not in business? And I think part of it is just like sheer stubborn determination, like never giving up and just making it work, just going at it again and again and again and again and again, Energizer Bunny, and just not stopping. That's part of it. The other part of it is that I really, really deeply in my heart, I have a knowingness that this stuff works. And it would be a disservice if I didn't do it. It's like there really is no option for me. There is no choice. Like, it's just not in my vocabulary. I'm not going to wake up one morning and say like, oh yeah, let's just turn that in. Like, there are thousands of people who are waiting for us to find them. They're like out there in some place, in some country, having issues with their family or their friends, or they're heartbroken or whatever. And they are waiting for us to find them. So we're waiting to find each other. So yeah, it's just not an option. We're going to be around.
This leads me into my next question that nobody sent in, but I just have for you. What are the next flower essences that are on your list of collecting, or at least places to collect these flower essences in?
There's it's a really funny name, but if you Google the image, the flower is spectacular. And it's the toad lily. Funny name, right? Yeah. Toad lily. But it's gorgeous. It's like passion flower on steroids. It's so pretty. And it grows all over in this beautiful hot spring place about an hour or so outside of Tokyo in Japan. I mean, I'm sure it grows in many different places around the world. Cool. But I remember seeing it there. And since we love hot springs so much, it'd be great when we're back in Asia. It's funny, I can't remember when I'm put on the spot. I have this little list of flowers that I want to collect. One of them is rainbow turmeric. It's a flower actually that I saw in the ginger garden in the Singapore Botanical Garden, and the flower is rainbow colored. It's amazing. And it's turmeric. Yeah, that's all that comes to mind right now. I'm really a fan of collecting flower essences in places where there are hot springs. And of course, I feel really at home in Asia, anywhere and everywhere and anywhere and everywhere in Asia. I'd go back and collect anything basically. And Azores outside of Portugal. And
I remember you talking about that one.
Yeah, there are hot springs there too. And I don't know, like cloud forest in Ecuador. Like there are certain places, that just have like a little intrigue.
So our closing question is, what advice would you offer someone considering turning a budding idea into a full-on business?
So I would just do it over and over and over and over and over. And if you hit a snag, figure out the snag. If you literally, like I said before, can figure anything out by doing it. I mean, for so many years, I didn't even do accounting in my business. So, at a certain point, making products was like, oh God, I need to learn QuickBooks and accounting software and figure out how much money we're spending and making, and financials, like profit and loss. This stuff was not in my vocabulary. Balance sheet, ratios, how to apply for loans, like all of that stuff was just totally foreign. But you just figure it out. And there are actually a lot of classes, so one thing that really helped me in particular is that there were free classes, coaching, and consultations through the city of Phoenix, through the state of Arizona, some federal programs. So over the years when I was trying to figure out how to be an entrepreneur, there would be these strategic moments in time where I would see a class offered and then I'd just jump on it. Things that I wouldn't know how to do, like how to apply for a loan and how to put your financials together. And, certain things that you wouldn't think about, like what if your business grows so fast that it makes you go bankrupt, and how to recognize signs of that. So like all of that stuff, you just figure it out. I would just recommend doing it as much as possible, and don't give up. Anything else?
No, that's it for the questions this week.
Okay, so that concludes our new format of episode of Q&A. If you have any questions, you can email them to.
So on our podcast page on the LOTUSWEI website, there's a button, Connect with Us, or you can email podcast@LOTUSWEI. Somewhere on the podcast page, though, there is a button that you can send in. I should have looked at that before we started doing this. There is a button that you can press and you can send in ideas for, people that you might think we should interview on the podcast, or just questions that you might have for Katie that you want answered. But yeah, I hope everybody's enjoyed listening to this.
It is really fun, and I love being interviewed and answering questions and being of service and sharing personal experiences. So if any of you have questions about anything, about business, meditation, life, intense emotions, how to deal with stuff when shit hits the fan, flower essences, natural healing, those are all things that, you can really have at it with me, and I'll be authentic and answer as best I can. And if there's something I can't answer, we'll bring in an expert who can. So thank you so much again for listening to the Flower Lounge. We will catch you next week. Thank you again so much for listening to the Flowerlounge Podcast. Wanted to let you know we're super excited. We just launched our very first crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo. Any contribution helps, even if it's $1. We just would love to see your name on the contributor list. It warms my heart to know that there are so many people contributing to this vision that we have. You can check that out on our website and find the crowdfunding campaign from there at the top of the page. And we have a retreat coming up in Costa Rica in November. There are only a few spots left. If any of you want to take a last-minute trip, you need a week of luscious downtime on the beach, in the jungle. I also just invited Erin Borbet. She'll be offering one-on-one acupuncture treatments while we're there, as well as Robin Sandomierski, who will be offering luminary intuitive sessions. And it's going to be an amazing week. So if you're interested in that, check out earthaura.com. And we thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for listening to The Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at lotuswei.com.